The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, folks. It's 12 p.m. Eastern Time. It is top of the hour. We're going to start in less than a minute. Let me launch the first polling question. I'd like to get an idea, more or less, if we're dealing with QuickBooks Online folks or QuickBooks Desktop folks. So just answer, whether you're mostly QuickBooks Online, mostly QuickBooks Desktop, or maybe somewhere in the middle, or maybe 100% QuickBooks Online, 100% in QuickBooks Desktop. I'm okay either way. But yeah, so it would be nice just to kind of know where we stand. And today's episode will be on a third-party app called to.QBO Convert Pro by a company by the name of MoneyThumb. So that would be the bulk of the information that we'll be covering. And this will be useful for either folks that already own the software or folks that are kind of on the fence of owning the software. To be honest with you, if you're an accounting professional that has more than one client, you probably should be having this software anyway. And I'll make the case pretty solidly that this is a great software to get. So all right. So yeah, so we have most of the answers there, and we got some. To start telling you more or less where we are here. So we are sort of dead in the middle. Let me go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you. So we have about 19%, and we have over 300 people logged in. So about 19% that only work with QuickBooks Online. We have 10% that only work with QuickBooks Desktop. 30% that work in both, mostly online. 25% that work on both, mostly desktop, and 16% dead in the middle. That's about right. That's about right. Okay, so let me do a quick check. Can you see my screen? So can you go into the and tell me if you can see my screen? But my screen should show the main page of QB Power Hour. So I'm waiting for that to show. It should be the the first page from the presentation. Okay, so I'm getting a yes, and I'm also getting. So obviously you can hear me okay because you were able to answer that. So give me a second while I hit record, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm also going to have my friend Matthew join me because he said he would volunteer and answer some questions. That was awesome of him. So thank you. Thank you, Matthew, for that. I'm making you organizer, and I'm also muting you. So just be careful. I'm making Matthew and Linda, or both, or maybe he's using her login, organizer, so he can answer some questions. Okay. All right. Good. So welcome everybody to QB Power Hour. Today is November 29th, 2018. And today's episode is converting PDF bank statements for QuickBooks using a third-party app called 2QBO Convert Pro Plus. We'll talk briefly about QB Power Hour, the CPE process, and then we'll spend most of the time, 50 minutes or more, on the actual content, which will be all about how to take bank statements that are not in QuickBooks ready format and convert them using the software to bring them into QuickBooks. And we'll briefly talk about the process of cleaning the data up. I mean, cleaning the data up, it's kind of its own world. So we'll discuss about what cleanup means and what it means to me personally. QB Power Hour, it's a webinar series every other Thursday. Next episode will be December 13th. We'll be doing a deep dive into a mobile warehouse app for QuickBooks Enterprise, very different than obviously today's episode. And then the next afterwards will be on the next every other week schedule, which will be QuickBooks at year end. We typically cover about 50% QuickBooks Desktop, 50% QuickBooks Online. Today we'll be in the middle. We'll talk about both platforms, and we'll bring third-party apps and different topics related to the industry. Today's all about a third-party app. All right, Michelle Long is the co-host of QB Power Hour. She's not with us today. I'm by myself, but I do have a friend, Matthew, who's manning the questions. So thank you, Matthew, for doing that. He also uses the software quite a bit. So I appreciate that. And Michelle, we'll get her back in next episode, the next couple episodes. She's traveling and training for the rest of the year. About myself, I'm Hector Garcia, CPA, live and work in Miami, Florida. There's my email if you have any questions about QuickBooks accounting, even about this app. Email me, hectorgarciacpa.com. About the CPE process, if you're a CPA or certified bookkeeper that wants a CPE certificate, you must attend the webinar live. We are recording this. We are going to make this available in YouTube afterwards, but you don't get the CPE certificate if you're watching it in YouTube. Only if you're watching it live. If you're logged in for at least 50 minutes and answer 3 out of the 4 polling questions, we already asked one. So 3 out of the 4 polling questions, we can issue the certificate, and the CPE certificates will be sent within 3 weeks. We would like to thank Avalara for generally sponsoring our webinar until the end of the year. Thank you, Avalara. Check them out for sales tax compliance type topics, avalara.com. And the episode sponsor, so the sponsor of today's episode is MoneyThumb. MoneyThumb makes a piece of software called QBO Convert Pro. You can check them out at qboconvertpro.com and you will see all the information. Wait until the end of the webinar because I'm going to break down a lot of these things for you. So let's jump right into it. Number one, I'm going to be referring to a QBO file. I'm going to say the word QBO, and I'm going to say .QBO or QBO file. If you hear me for the purposes of this webinar and this video, if you hear me say the word QBO, I am not referring to QuickBooks Online. I'm referring to the digital file that you download from the bank that allows you to upload into QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online whenever you can't directly connect and download the transactions. Okay, it's called a Web Connect file. That's the actual real name, but the extension, the file name extension, is QBO. So when you're going in the bank and you have a whole bunch of options of things you can download, one of them would be QBO, which basically means QuickBooks Web Connect, which is both available for QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online. So for the context of this webinar, again, the word QBO, when it comes out of my mouth, has nothing to do with QuickBooks Online, has to do with the file you download in order to upload transactions into QuickBooks. Now, why we use a QBO file? Well, we do that because we want to upload transactions instead of entering them directly. And we want the same experience as if we're connecting the bank straight from QuickBooks into the bank and downloading the transactions. Now, some banks provide QBO files, some don't. Some banks will give you the option to download them, and you don't have to pay the direct connection fee if you upload them manually. Remember, if you're using QuickBooks Desktop and you want to connect, quote unquote, connect the bank to QuickBooks, you usually have to pay. The banks charge between $10 and $15 to that direct connection, and some banks allow you to download that file as an alternative to paying a fee and uploading it manually. Of course, it's much better when you have the direct connection, but not all of us are lucky enough to have all our banks connected to QuickBooks. Now, very important, QBO files or Web Connect files cannot be edited in Excel. I mean, technically you can, but it's very difficult to do. You can do it in any sort of batch. If you were to download a CSV file that opens in Excel, that can be downloaded pretty easily. So, I mean, that could be edited pretty easily. So if you want to edit or manipulate the file, and we'll talk about what that means and why that's even relevant in this conversation, but only the CSV file can really be done. But what's the problem with the CSV file? The CSV file has two underlying problems. One, QuickBooks Desktop doesn't allow you to upload CSV files as bank feeds. It has to be a QBO file. So you have to convert it. It's the only way to get it into desktop. And two, QuickBooks Online does allow you to upload CSV files. The problem is that QuickBooks Online has a restriction on how many fields you can upload. And currently, check numbers or transaction numbers and additional memos cannot be uploaded. So that's a little bit frustrating to the folks that upload CSV files if you have that issue before you know exactly what I mean. All right. So if you were to download hold on, give me 1 second here. Just fix something here. I was supposed to hide that the last 4 digits of that number. Anyway, if you were to download a file from Chase, for example, the screen looks different. I mean, every bank has a different screen. For example, in Chase, that's what the screen looks like. And it'll give you a drop down that says file type, where you can select if it's a CSV or a QBO file, then you select the date range. Citibank has a little bit of a different look, the way they show the different options, and they give you different file types. And I managed to put a couple of screenshots together. If you've had this experience before, you obviously know what it looks like. I'm just kind of illustrating that every bank has a different interface and look and feel. And what I meant by QBO is what says there, the difference between downloading a CSV, a QBO, a QIF, and all that stuff. There's what American Express looks like when you manually download a .QBO file. And this is what Bank of America looks like when you manually download a QBO file, and US Bank. So I just kind of did a compilation of what those look like just to add some context in here. So what are the ideal formats? So if I had the choice to choose a format to work with, I will always want to work with a .QBO file. I even prefer in some cases to manually upload my data than actually connecting it direct to the bank. Because if you've had this experience before, you know that sometimes the data that comes to the bank gets truncated or it doesn't come complete or it comes with too much garbage at the beginning and you really can't read the information that's there. So there's so many different potential issues as of why we can't. I sometimes I don't like the direct connection, so I like to be able to edit the file. So I think that if you're not going to touch it, if you're not going to edit it, for sure, the Web Connect file is going to be the best option. That means that you have to be able to log into the bank, and that means the bank account needs to be active, and also it means that your bank has to support it and support the date range that you're looking for. The second best option is a CSV file. I argue is the best, but for most people, CSV is not the best because they still have to convert it. But what I love about the CSV file is that most banks give you more download information via CSV. So some banks will restrict maybe a year's worth of transactions on a QBO file, but they'll give you 2 years on a CSV. Or some banks will restrict to 6 months or 3 months worth of QBO transactions, but they give you a year or two on CSV. So I like CSV because sometimes it gives you more on the date range, and also because it can be edited or manipulated. And if you don't have a PDF file and you have the CSV file, then it's going to be very easy to convert. You have this app that's $60 called CSV to QBO, made by the same people of the app we're going to feature today. And so that's a very relatively low cost, and that's a one-time fee for unlimited conversion. So I find CSV files to be the most powerful option. Now, what happens when I don't have a QBO file and I don't have a CSV file and I have a bank statement from my client? Well, it all depends on the format of the bank statement. In some cases, you have a digital bank statement, which means that they downloaded it from the bank's website and they emailed it to you. And that can be converted with either the software we're going to feature today or two alternatives, which is from the same maker, which is called PDF to QBO and PDF to CSV. However, sometimes we can scan them and hopefully get a high quality scan, and the software will run what's called an OCR, which will try to read the text and then convert it. And then you need the plus version of the software to be able to read the scan statements. But I'm putting a little asterisk there that says sometimes, just because the quality of the scan it affects it quite a bit. Again, the CSV to QBO converter, which is the least expensive of one, is $60 one-time fees. Desktop software allows you to convert unlimited. At the very least, I think every accounting professional should have that tool. $60 shouldn't be that much of it. But we're going to focus on the PDF stuff because that's really the more complicated stuff. So on this slide, I'm showing you what a scan statement look like. Normally, when you scan a statement in, you will see markings. It's just not like a perfect black and white. The scanner itself may pick up tones of gray, tones of blue as you scan it. But in contrast, a digital PDF statement, because some folks still have trouble just understanding the difference between these two. A digital PDF statement is one that you can open and you can literally highlight the text. So if your PDF software, Adobe, whatever you use, allows you to highlight the text on the PDF file, that means it is probably a digital or digitized scan, which the software is much more likely to pick up because the data it's already in digital format. So just remember, it's always a big challenge to deal with the scanned ones because you're going to be dealing with the quality issues and the markings and all that stuff. If a client sends you a statement that has a bunch of markings, highlights and stuff like that, just assume automatically it's just not going to work. It needs to be very, very clean, scan for you to do that. Now, a CSV file, of course, is one that you can open in Excel, and it looks just like this. It's one you can edit and change in Excel. And a QBO file, if you were to open a QBO file in Excel, which you can't, if you right click and click Open with Excel, it looks like this. It's actually an XML format for those nerdy people out there that kind of like say, "Oh, that looks like XML." So that's an XML format. You can technically edit it, but you can't do it in batch. So it'll take you forever to like do something in batch, that's what we're gonna do a little bit later on as we get that. So before we go into the demo, real quick, why even consider converting PDF to CSV? So one is because we want to use bank feeds. We want to work as if we connected the transactions to the bank. We want all the wonderful, amazing features of bank feeds, the bank rules, and all the fast ways to code things. And I'm going to give you some. If you're brand new to bank feeds, you may have to go back and watch some videos on bank feeds to understand this. But the whole context of this is that we're bringing the transactions into bank feeds or banking center downloaded transactions, as they call it in QuickBooks Online. In some cases, as I mentioned, you can't download the QBO file because you don't have access to the bank, or the client doesn't want to give you access to the bank, or the bank doesn't give you access to them, whatever happens to be. The most common case, I would say 9 times out of 10, the reason why I have this issue is because QuickBooks Online can only download 90 days worth of transactions. And most of it is because it's a QuickBooks Online limitation. In some cases with QuickBooks Desktop, it could be a bank's limitation. So if you want to bring in more than 90 days, you either have to upload a file if you don't have it, and you have the PDFs, that may be the only way you can do it. Maybe you don't want to pay the direct connection fees because you have QuickBooks Desktop, and so you want to maybe convert a CSV or a PDF into a .QBO file. Maybe the bank account is closed. This happens to me quite a bit when I had to do 3 years, 4 years worth of tax returns for someone that basically closed their business and they're now being hit by the IRS. That works. This is a great tool to use that. And also because I may want to clean up the data. So we're going to go back to data cleanup in a second, because that's probably the most hector of this whole webinar. It's a very personal technique that I have to clean up my data before I put it to QuickBooks. It's really what makes it what makes my process stand out, and why so many people buy the software at my recommendation, because they really understand how it saves you time. Okay. All right. So bottom line, the only source of transactions you have are CSV or a bank statement. And again, you don't want to enter by hand. You want to enter it through bank feeds. Okay. So real quick, just to clarify why, quote unquote, we would want to clean up or edit the file. Well, there's a couple of cases, and we'll do some examples. One is the bank sometimes truncates the names. Like Bank of America, it's a big culprit of this, where it'll say transfer from, and it'll give you like the first number of the bank account that is being transferred to, and then you don't even know what it is until you're looking at the bank statement. So you'll be able to remove some characters in a cleanup process and actually show what you want. The biggest technique is adding payees to checks. Everybody knows that uses bank feeds that the payees of checks don't transfer into QuickBooks. They always have to be manually transcribed. Well, if you somehow had a spreadsheet of all the checks that were written by check number, you can replace them on your Excel file and then upload it into QuickBooks already with a payee name, so I don't have to be transcribing it. Or for example, there are multiple vendors that come in with extra data. Home Depot, McDonald's, all these big companies, gas stations have pretty much the same name, but then have a different number to the end of it. Sometimes QuickBooks doesn't pick it up as the same vendor because pick it up at the same vendor because it has those names afterwards. Okay, so in that there's a YouTube video in that slide, and you can download the slides. It's on the handout section. That is a 25-minute video where I explain in detail what that cleanup process looks like. I'll briefly work it into the demo. So lastly, what is the whole point of the last 50 minutes we spent introducing this concept is because we want to get the only source of data that we have, which is a PDF statement, and we want to get it into QuickBooks bank feeds. Okay, so let's take a quick break to run a polling question. So we can go right into the demo. So do you currently have any of the software? So let me know how many of you actually have the software. So I said that would help out, and it gets a bit confusing because uh, MoneyThumb has so many different versions of the software. They have the PDF to QBO, they have the to.QBO Convert Pro, they have the CSV to QBO, and then they have some online cloud-based products, and they have a whole bunch of things. I've been recommending for a very long time. I'd probably say for about 3 years, and a lot of people associate me with the software. Full disclosure, I have nothing to do with the company. I wish I had stuck in the company. I just promote them because it is the single most impactful software I ever used in my practice that defines how fast I work. Okay, it is the biggest, it has been the biggest improvement in my workflow and data entry process. It's the use of this software. So I use the professional version of it, which is the to.QBO to Convert Pro. So we'll demo that software right after this polling question. For the time being, let's see what questions I have here. So somebody was asking for the CSV to QBO, is that $60 a month? No, that's $60 one-time fee, and it's a desktop software. Deborah says Sasant is a lot cheaper. Deborah, I don't even know what you're talking about because Sasant is not even comparable to this software because they do two different things. See, Sasant or Transaction Importer Pro are meant to import transactions into the register. This software doesn't import into QuickBooks. This is not importing software. This is software that converts the file so you can bring it into bank feeds. So we're not importing anything into QuickBooks. We're bringing the transactions so we can classify them in there. Okay, so I want to make sure that's clear. Okay, let's see. And somebody says, why wouldn't you use batch enter in QuickBooks Accountant or QuickBooks Enterprise? What a good question, Tiffany. It's different. If you use batch enter, you still have to classify, select an expense account, a category on each line of the transaction. Remember, bank feeds has bank rules, and again, the premise of this is because we want to use our bank rules. We want to take advantage of our bank rules. If you import with Transaction Pro Importer or use the batch enter tool in QuickBooks Desktop Accountant, which I love the tool. You've seen many of my videos when I talk about it. You still have to select the category either in the Excel file or on the batch enter tool. So I want to make sure those two are really clear there. And Tiffany says bank rules in QuickBooks Desktop. Yes, QuickBooks Desktop has bank rules. Okay, so so real quick, if you're new to bank feeds or like downloaded transactions into QuickBooks, in the slides there are links. I have a 19-minute video where I can explain how that works in QuickBooks Desktop, and I have about 37-minute video because I love QuickBooks Online bank feeds. It's just really amazing. I really don't know what I would do without it. A 37-minute that can explains how that works. And again, if you've never used bank feeds before, all this stuff is going to fly right over your head because this is with the context that we're bringing it into bank feeds. So let's go and let's do the software demo and can explain to you how this works. So first of all, if you already own the software, and there was quite a big percentage of you that already own the software, once you buy the software, you get free updates. So you want to make sure that you go to About and you click on Check for Updates and click on Check Update and download the update because you can get all those updates for free. And you want to be on the latest version because the developers always add new technology that makes the reading faster and better, and they add more banks into sort of like their database of things that it can read. So you want to be on the latest version. The latest version is going to be version 11, subversion 114, I believe. So I'm actually like a little bit of a version short. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bank statement. I'm going to start with a digital bank statement. So I'm going to open up a digital bank statement here. And as I mentioned before, the way I know a bank statement is digital is because I can just select the data, the text in it very easily. Now, there are other ways to know. You physically downloaded it from the bank, or you know for a fact that the user, the client downloaded it from the bank. But typically, if you can select the text, if you can select each character like this, typically that's a digital bank statement. So when you grab a digital bank statement, you literally just click and drag into the drop zone. You can also click on where it says convert and select the file from there. So that's also possible. You can do either one. Something that's really cool about MoneyThumb is you can do multiple statements at once. If you wanted to do 12 months, 5 months at once, you can select a whole bunch and drop them, and it goes into a batching process. I'm not going to go through the batching process because there's some additional steps. We're going to do 1 month at a time just to kind of illustrate the point here. So I'm going to click and drag that digital statement into the drop zone. And digital statements read really, really fast. Like they take about 20 seconds. Like in this case, I think it literally took like 2 seconds. And then what happens is this pop-up window pops up, and this is called the preview window. Now, what the preview window does is it gives you a couple of really key components. Because remember, what we're doing, the premise is we are trying to bring a lot of information into QuickBooks really, really fast, right? So that's what we're trying to do, right? So we want to make sure that the data is also accurate, right? The data has to be accurate. Very, very, very important. So what this screen does, it gives you a couple of really important tools. Tool number one, this is before we bring it into QuickBooks. It does a calculation of beginning balance, ending balance, total debits, total credits, and it says reconciled. What that means is it double checked that the math is right to make sure there's no missing transactions during the read. I'm going to show you if there's a missing transaction during the read, what that looks like when I do the scanned version. It will be more clear when we do the scanned version. Now, all the data comes here where it says payee. What's really awesome about this, again, we're modifying the data before it goes into QuickBooks. So what's awesome about this is I can literally just manually change any of the fields that are here. So if I wanted to change a dollar amount, if I wanted to change the vendor name, I could clean that up here. Of course, I think cleaning this up in Excel is much faster. Refer to that video that's on the slides for that. But you can change any of that stuff. But the other thing that you can do is you can go to where it says payee cleanup settings. Okay, so you have payee cleanup settings, and this is really a killer tool. So we go to payee cleanup settings, and we can actually remove extra data from here, so it doesn't all that junk come into QuickBooks, and it just basically crowds our memo, and it does a whole bunch of stuff. So we can actually literally type in information that we don't want it to come in, or we can say, you know what, go ahead and remove phone numbers. So you can click on the checkbox and click on remove phone numbers. So that's one of them, remove phone numbers. And I want you to kind of notice live as I'm removing it and adding it here. So I can remove phone numbers, remove state abbreviations. I can remove special characters. So you can start cleaning up the vendors. And it's not perfect. I mean, it's not perfect, bottom line. But then you also have words like cash purchase or withdrawal, or you have all these extra words that basically crowd up your first characters, and those first 30 characters are the most important visually that you need. So you want to get rid of a lot of those characters. So that cleanup is an option. You don't have to clean it up. I could just uncheck this and just do the regular conversion. And remember, the regular conversion will basically bring in the data just like it would be with a direct connection. Now, one really important tip for QuickBooks desktop users. If you use QuickBooks Online, you know there's a really awesome feature in QuickBooks Online where it can bring in the payee information into the memo. But QuickBooks Desktop doesn't do that. So this tool can do that. And this, I'll take personal credit for this because I'm the one that convinced the developer to add this feature. What you can do is you can have the payee duplicate over the memo for the purposes of bringing it into QuickBooks Desktop and not losing the original text. So all you have to do, and this is just a little trick here, you have to click on payee and memo, and then click here, it says memo add-on. And by just modifying that, when the data comes into QuickBooks Desktop, you're going to see how the entire string comes in the memo. And by the way, this doesn't make sense to anyone that has not used QuickBooks Desktop before bank feeds. So if you use QuickBooks Desktop before bank feeds, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So then before I do the conversion, I'm going to go to where it says set QuickBooks account information. And this is sort of like the internal code for letting QuickBooks know whether this is a bank or a credit card. So you pick here whether it's a bank or a credit card. So in this case, it's a credit card. And then you click where it says lookup. This is called the FID. This is for QuickBooks to know which bank it is. Now, that's actually not important at all, but it is important for it to be the same number and the same FID when you're trying to connect, when you're trying to import more transactions in the future. So what you choose here and what you type here, it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. What matters is it has to be the same exact one if you're going to continue to use this app to upload into the same bank account in QuickBooks Desktop. In QuickBooks Online, you can always override that, but in QuickBooks Desktop, this has to be consistent. So one of the common questions I have is, Hector, I have this strange bank called Bank of Northern Wichita. And when I go to the lookup section, I can't find it, right? So if you can't find your bank here, that doesn't mean the software can't do the conversion. It just means that QuickBooks doesn't have the bank in their financial institution list. So what you do, just choose Chase or Wells Fargo or Bank of America. Choose one of them. It really doesn't matter what you choose here. Again, listen to me. Pay attention. It doesn't matter what you choose here. Um, it just matters that it's the same thing next month that you're bringing in data. Okay. In a lot of cases, I do this for like to bring a whole year's worth of data, and then I connect the bank on the direct connection for the real time. So sometimes I never have to do this more than once. But again, if your bank is not here, that doesn't mean it's not compatible. It just means that QuickBooks doesn't recognize it as a FID or a financial institution. Now here in the account number, again, this needs to be consistent. So QuickBooks knows what bank account to map it to. So once you put that there and you hit OK, then you're pretty much done. What you do is you click on where it says Create QBO, and that's going to create a QBO file into your computer that you're going to upload manually. So I'm going to click on Create QBO, and that gets done automatically. Let me open up that so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so there's my QBO file. Okay, so that's a file that's just sitting in my computer waiting to be uploaded into QuickBooks Desktop. Simultaneously, I'll just show you real quick. You can also, let me just do a conversion again. You can also do the same thing and convert it into a CSV. Okay, so notice that during the conversion stage, I don't have to go straight to QBO. I can go to CSV. So if I wanted to modify it or look at it or review it or whatever it happens to be before I go into QuickBooks, I have it on CSV as well. So at this point, you got the PDF and you converted it over. You have two options. You can work on it on CSV, you can play with it, you can clean it, then convert it to QBO using the same software. Right, so it's up to you if you want to do the cleanup process in Excel, or you can upload it straight to QuickBooks Online or desktop with a QBO file. So let me show you that real quick. So I'm going to go into the File menu, go to Utilities, go to Import, and then I'm going to click on Web Connect Files. Then I'm going to go find the recently converted PDF statement in a QBO format, and then I'm going to click on Open. Then I'm going to have if I already have mapped it before, it's going to go straight into bank feeds. If I haven't mapped it, it's going to ask me to map it. So I'm going to click on the account and then click on transaction list. And then everything went into QuickBooks as if I either downloaded it from the bank or I direct connected it from the bank. Now, on this particular statement, I did a duplication of payee to memo. So I'm going to show you when I click on show memo. And actually, did I do it? Oh, I did it with the transactions after May. Hold on, let me scroll down to the bottom so we can look at the bottom transactions. So all these bottom transactions that I brought in, notice that the payee and the memo is duplicated. Now, why does that matter? Again, only if you're a QuickBooks Desktop user, you would understand what this means. If I come in the payee and I write something wrong, let's say I put L or I don't put a vendor at all, okay? Because this happens a lot of times, first-time users and novices, that they forget to put the payee or they put the wrong payee there. And I'm going to go ahead and just put an expense account here and the expense account here. And I'm going to click on add, quick add. Let me show you what's wonderful in QuickBooks Desktop, what's wonderful about what I just did, which is duplicate the payee into the memo. What this will do is when I go and review the transaction in the register, okay? So I'm going to go review the transaction in the register. Let me show you. So I'm reviewing the register. Let's say that I missed and I put the wrong vendor, or I didn't put a vendor in there. I still have intact the payee information in the memo. Now, QuickBooks Online, about 9 months ago, they added this feature, and it's amazing. I mean, it's just night and day difference, because there's so many people that don't know what they're doing in bank feeds. They put the wrong payee or they skip the payee. So I love having the original information in the memo. So QuickBooks Desktop doesn't have this feature. So the only way to make that work is to override the QBO file by duplicating that information in there. Anyway, um, in contrast, for example, if you have somebody here that puts the wrong payee. So for example, this person puts voice as the payee, right? Because they're reading the wrong area from there, and they put a category the same way. So I'm using it. In this transaction, I hadn't copied it over. Like this first month, I uploaded it with the regular bank feeds. And then I'm going to add that and show you what the consequence is, okay, without getting too much into detail. But if you actually see me add that in there, you'll notice that on this one, no memo comes in, or in some cases, just some garbage comes in. Okay. All right. So that's just a really important piece. And in just to kind of consolidate the two concepts here, let me pull up QuickBooks Online and do the same. Give me 1 second. See if we can get QuickBooks Online up. Okay, there we go. So the way we work with QuickBooks Online is we go to banking. Again, we're manually uploading the QBO file that I just converted. We go to where it says file upload on the right of the screen. Okay, so we're going to click on file upload right there on the right. Okay, and once you click on that, there'll be a drop-down menu, right? And you're not going to click on manage rules or order checks. You're going to click on the actual button itself. So you're going to click on that file upload button, and it's going to take you to the screen that says, okay, what file do you want to upload? We'll wait for that to load, and we'll click on browse, and then we'll do the exact same thing we did with QuickBooks Desktop. These two processes are pretty much identical, right? It's just the screens look different. You pick the QBO file, click on open, then next. Then it's going to ask you which account in QuickBooks would you like to connect to. And remember, this is the information that we entered in the MoneyThumb's software when we're doing the conversion. I'm going to create a new one and call it Chase Visa. So I'm going to select the credit card, and we'll call this one Chase Visa, and then click on save and close, and then click on next. Okay. So once that's finishing reading, that takes about a minute, even less. We'll click on let's go. And then we're going to go into bank feeds, and we should see all the transactions that were brought over. So again, I'm not importing transactions. I'm bringing them into bank feeds. So then I can simply just choose my vendor, right? And then select my category and click on add. Okay, now let me do a quick polling question, and we're going to move on to the whole process of cleaning data and adjusting data and importing vendors, which is another really killer feature. Again, it's a more unique feature. It's not a feature of the software. It's just unique to the processes that I take. So while this polling question's up, we'll have this for about 2 minutes. And I really want to thank Linda or Matthew. I'm not sure if it's Matthew on the Linda's account or Linda for helping me answer some of these questions. And by the way, the person answering this question is not an employee of the sponsor of the app. It's actually a fellow pro advisor that uses this app quite a bit. So let me see what questions maybe they weren't able to answer what the polling question is up. So I was just wondering if you have used other software, like a different company to convert or import PDF into QuickBooks or into Excel. Okay. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, somebody says, how does this compare to ScanWriter? I think it's very similar, Don. ScanWriter is a very similar software. The difference is ScanWriter will cost you like $2,000 plus $20 per month per account, something like that. This is a $300 software, so I think it's much different. Let's see what else we got here. Um, is the file does the file send a QBO file via bank feeds? No. So the QBO file is similar to what the bank actually sends in the direct connection, but there are situations in which the direct bank feed data is slightly different than the .QBO or a CSV file. Um, Leah says, how did I duplicate the bank memo into the QBO file? That was a technique inside the software. So check out the recording for that. Let's see. Um, no more questions. Most people are just complimenting that this is really good and a real lifesaver. Is there a time limit in how much transactions this can? You can do 7 years worth. You can do 100 years worth. It really doesn't matter as long as you got the data in a PDF or in a CSV. The time ranges don't matter. Does it read check images? No, it doesn't read check images. So nothing out there is really going to read handwriting, I think. Let's see. Can this be allowed to download transactions into Quicken? Yes, not the software that I'm working on, but the same maker of the software. And I'm gonna show you the website and show you how to purchase it and all the different options as well. Uh, okay, yep. I think most of it is just people. Some people are asking the difference between this and Receipt Bank. Again, I don't know how this even compares to Receipt Bank. When will the recording be available? I'm going to try somehow, by the grace of God, to get it done by today, because I know a lot of you are going to want to go back and watch this again, like as soon as we're done. Okay, so all right, that's it. That's good. So let me hit that. Let me close the polling question. Thank you for that. And that was the third of the polling questions. All right, so we got about 18 minutes left. Let's make sure my screen is still being shared and you're looking at QuickBooks Online. Let me take a look at what I have on my slides. Okay, nope. All right, good. So let's talk about a couple other things. So one of the most important reasons, or most dominant reasons why I want to have the data in CSV format or in Excel format before I bring it into QuickBooks is to be able to edit it. So let me show you what I mean by editing it. So when I bring it into CSV format first, what I like to do is I like to clean up the payees. So I'm going to show you just a couple of examples of how I do that. I'm going to open the file in CSV format. I'm going to clean up the payees, and then I'm going to upload the payee information into QuickBooks, because what I want also is not have to create each payee while I'm doing the bank feed. So I'm trying to save in time in two ways. One, I'm trying to bring the transactions in, and two, I don't want to create a new payee each time. Again, if you use QuickBooks for a long time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So what I'll do is I'll take my payee list here in Excel. And this is more of an Excel technique. And again, I have a video that slows down and kind of shows you this step by step. I'm trying to squeeze that into the webinar today. So what I'll come in here and I'll clean up some of these vendors simply by deleting the extra data. If for whatever reason I didn't delete it in the to.QBO software, and I'll start copying some of the vendors that are the same. So I'll get rid of like the numbers for my gas station and copy this down. And I'll just start like sort of cleaning up to make sure that I don't get any duplicate vendors. So I take all the vendors that are pretty much the same thing and I copy the information down. Hopefully you can appreciate and see it as I go and do it. Now I will tell you I'm gonna run a webinar, a 3-hour webinar, where I'm gonna slow down and show you all these things slowly, step by step, because data cleanup, data prep, it's very dear to my heart. And everybody that takes this webinar with me increases their efficiency twofold, pretty much immediately. So once I clean up the vendors, what I do is I can take the vendors and I can copy them into maybe a separate spreadsheet like this. I'll show you how this works. I'll copy them into a separate spreadsheet, and then I come in here and remove the duplicates. So I'm going to remove the duplicates, and I'll save this into a separate file. So I'm going to save this into what, like a vendor file. And this becomes much better and efficient for people doing maybe a year's worth of transactions during tax season, because then you can bring in all the CSV files for the entire year. and do that. So once I have the vendor list in a CSV file, I simply go to QuickBooks Online and go to the gear menu and go to import data. And I go to vendors, select my cleaned up CSV file that has a cleaned up vendor list, click open, click next. And this was 1 month, right? Select the field, click on next, and within seconds import 40 vendors, 100 vendors, 1,000 vendors. So you have all this information already into QuickBooks. And then once I'm doing the bank feeds, so I'm going to go into banking and I'll just show you exactly what this looks like. So I go into banking. It's not going to bring in duplicates because I already cleaned them up. So I'll give you an error if you try to bring in a duplicate, which is fine. And I'll just bring in the ones that are original. So I'm going to come in here, and instead of typing, drop down, add new, or create a new vendor, I got my vendor list that looks exactly like my credit card list. So I type in here and type Google Voice. That's already in my list of vendors and done. I don't have to, I'll save one step of not having to create the vendor. And by the way, I'm a freak. I'm efficient, and I'm anal about saving seconds when it comes to entering thousands lines of data, because during tax season our office is extremely busy. Like, we do so many tax returns and so many financial statements, a year's worth of transactions, and our prices are extremely competitive. Like, one of the things that's crazy about our office is what I charge for consulting, which is a very high number, versus what my office charges for bookkeeping. Like, it doesn't make any sense. People don't believe that we are so inexpensive because we can do these things so fast. Like, the average bookkeeper will look at 12 months worth of bank statements with like a 200 transactions per month. They'll look at it and they'll want to charge at least $1,000, right? At least. Our office will do this for like $300, $400, just because we do it so fast, so quick. So we get a year's worth of financial statements done usually within half a day, right? For busy clients. For Again, we're talking about cash basis. We're not necessarily talking about people that we're doing matching with invoices. We're talking about write-up work for the most part. Okay, so I wanted to show you that, and QuickBooks Desktop works the same. You can import, just to show you real quick, QuickBooks Desktop has a place where you can import your vendors as well. So if you go to the list menu and go to add edit add edit list, you can select vendors and you can import them or copy and paste them into here the same way. So I can take, and again, I only took 1 month's worth. Imagine if you would take 12 months worth and you would have 300 vendors. Remember, every vendor you create in QuickBooks takes at least 3 seconds. So 300 seconds is like 5 minutes. 5 minutes times 100 clients, it's 500 minutes, right? So you kind of have to be anal about every single second you spend doing this stuff. So you can import it into QuickBooks Desktop as well. You can import the vendor list, which I love, as an option. And some people ask me, hey, why don't you use this import feature in QuickBooks Desktop to bring in the transactions from a CSV format? I do that as well. Sometimes, depending on the situation, I'll use the batch enter and bring the data from CSV into QuickBooks. The only difference is I don't get to use the bank rules. To me, the bank rules are everything. Um, Daniel saying, Hector, what happened to value pricing? Well, Daniel, the component of the tax work and the tax planning is what I value price. The bookkeeping is the one that I can afford to give it away, basically. Like, we hardly charge for bookkeeping in our office because we value price as the consulting work. But we can afford to, because bookkeeping doesn't take a lot of time for us. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. And a key, I think it's a key comment here. Someone saying, what about all the clients that handwrite checks? So I'm going to show you just a really particular personal technique. So I'm going to pull up another bank statement here. I'm going to pull up a different one. Let me pull up, I think this one is scanned. So I'm going to open it up just to show you. So I'm going to show you now with a scanned bank statement, so you see what that process looks like. And I'm also going to give you a sort of a quick preview of just a really in-depth webinar that I have that talks about so many different techniques, but how to get the check images, not the check images, but the payee names in there prior to import. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this PDF scanned bank statement and convert it using the software. So give me a second while I'll check here the open questions. Let's see. There we go. Uh, so I'm gonna grab the scan statement and drag and drop it. Now we are gonna stare at the reading file image for a little bit longer than usual because the software, and this is where the plus version of the software that has this feature has OCR technology. And what this does is that it actually tries to determine what the scan text is to put it into text. So for the most part, if you're scanning, it's not as smooth as a digital statement. If you're scanning, it may take 5 minutes per statement to scan. I mean, that still beats manual data entry all day long. So we'll give it a second. I'll give it a minute or so for that to finish scanning. But I'm doing it on the fly, so you kind of see it. So let me see what other questions I can answer here. Why not use bank rules to deal with vendor names in QBO? David, you still have to create the vendor names in QBO. So you can use bank rules to match the payee name and that, but you still have to create the vendor names. So, but it's true with a clean set of bank rules in QuickBooks Online, you don't have to clean up the data before. But in QuickBooks Desktop, you do. And I'm a big QuickBooks Desktop user for write-up work. So that's really where it comes to. Somebody says, can you show the vendor import again? Yeah, sure. Well, we go to the gear menu and then we go to import data and we go to vendors and we're going to click on browse and select like the Excel file, the CSV file that contains all the vendor names, just the vendor names. Then we click on next. Then we map it. We tell it, okay, which column is what. You only need to bring the payee name, really. You click on next, and that's going to bring in all the vendor names. So that, again, that's for the purposes of not having to recreate them or create one by one. Okay, so that's that question answered. Let's see what else we got. How do you register for the 3-hour webinar? I'll tell you about that because it's not a free webinar, so I'll give you access to that. Let's see what we got. I would like to learn the Excel cleanup techniques that you have. Okay, that's the type of stuff that we teach in those in-depth webinars. Let's see. Yeah, there's a bunch of questions. I may have to go and look at these questions afterwards because there's just so many and they have a lot of text in them. I don't know if I can do all of them. So, okay, all right. So let's check out on the software. Let's see how the conversion is going. Only got about 7 minutes left, so let's make the most out of this last example here. Yeah, and let's open up the software. That's still reading. Yeah, and again, that's normal because it's reading off a scanned PDF. And I said about 5 minutes, so that should be about right. Let me if just in case that runs long, let me show you something real quick. Let me get a bank statement that I've already converted into CSV format. And I'm going to show you the technique that I use to get check payee names into the CSV file prior from me importing it into QuickBooks. Again, the trick with payee names is that most uh, clients are going to ask you to read handwritten check images, which takes forever, right? So, okay, not this one. Let me look at maybe this one. Hang on a second. I'm actually broadcasting this in Facebook at the same time that I'm doing it through the webinar, so the computer is a little bit slower than normal. But I'm going to open up this is a converted CSV file from a bank. And at some point, we're going to see all the check images. Here we go. Okay, so what I usually do, and this has to do with pricing too. So what I usually do is I take my scanned CSV file. And by the way, this one is a whole year's worth of transactions. So I'm showing you, I downloaded 1,000 transactions from the bank, or converted it 1,000 transactions from the bank. Whoops, hang on. Uh, okay, so I downloaded 1,000 transactions from the bank. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to run a filter here, data filter, and I'm going to sort it by check number. So what this is going to do is now it's going to give me all of my checks only with the checks numbers, and they have no payee information. So what I do is I take the date, the check number, and the amount. Okay, maybe I can delete these two here, but I'm going to take check number, the amount. I'm going to copy it into a separate spreadsheet, and I'm giving you guys. Hopefully you appreciate this. I'm giving you guys a very internal tip. This is how we do things in our business. And this is one of the things that gives us the edge. So I'm going to delete these two things. And what I do is I generally give my client two prices on bookkeeping. I say one price if I have to handwrite, read your handwritten checks and determine what it is. And the other price, if you return back this spreadsheet with the payee name instead of what it says there, check 1638. And usually I make it at least like $600 difference in price. So my customer always says, no, don't worry. I'll type in the vendor names in here. So they come in here and they put John, right? Mary, Steve, Chipotle, whatever, whoever they're writing checks to, and they'll come in and they'll pre-fill that information for me. On top of that, I'll ask him to also add the memo so I know what is it all about. So I'll add an extra line here, and they're going to put their contractor, rent, whatever it happens to be, and they'll fill in all this information for you. Okay. So then once I have my customer do that work because they chose to pay less and they chose to do the work for me, I take this information and I run a VLOOKUP, and I don't have time to do a VLOOKUP example. I run a VLOOKUP, I replace it from my main sheet, then I convert it into QBO, then I bring it into QuickBooks, and then all the payee names come in. So I don't have time to demo that entire part, but I think most of you kind of get it. So going back to this conversion that I had made, this was a conversion that was made from a scan statement. So as you notice that with scan statements, they're not always going to be perfect. It's going to tell you real quick if the total debits don't match the credits. And what's awesome about the software, this is one of the things that blow me away, is all the transactions that it's actually not sure about, it will highlight in yellow for you. So you can actually click on the inspect button, and you can once you click on the inspect button, it will open the PDF file and highlight the line that for whatever reason it didn't understand what it was. So then you can read it at that point and say, okay, I see why it didn't catch it. Just the arrangement of the information is different. And again, this was a scan statement. So scan statements are not perfect. So as you can see it in here, then you can make whatever correction you want. You make the manual correction here. Again, this is only for scan statements. Scans are not perfect. You make all the corrections here, add the payee names. While you're at it, just add the payee names to the checks, and then you do the conversion afterwards. So I just wanted to show you what happens with scan statements because it's not perfect with scan statements. That's the one thing I can promise you for sure. That's one of the issues. Now I want to show you, illustrate here right before we wrap things up, illustrate one of the examples of the importance of cleaning up, because the bank comes in with all this junk, right? The date, online transfer to, usually the actual account gets truncated and you can't read it in QuickBooks. So this is where the payee cleanup settings are really amazing. So I would get rid of dates and then get rid of the word, for example, online transfer. So I just type here online transfer. And the minute I type online transfer, notice that information on the stuff that's coming into QuickBooks will go away. So now you'll be able to read the actual account that is being transferred to. So again, only if you've done QuickBooks Online or QuickBooks Desktop, bank feeds that come all truncated, you truly appreciate the value of that. Anyway, I know some people run right after the hour. I'm gonna go through about 5 more minutes just to kind of clarify a couple of things, show you some additional resources. I created a Facebook group just to discuss data conversion. So I'm going to give you the link to that. It's a free Facebook group. So I kind of want all the data nerds, right, my fellow data conversion import nerds that love this stuff, to be part of that group. And the folks that have to run right away, I will let you go. So let me run the last polling question, and I am going to like kind of tell you how much the software is, how to buy it, and there's different versions of it. So I'm going to clarify all that. So I'll drop off with the last polling question. If you have to leave, but just give me an extra 5 minutes or so, and we'll clarify the last couple of things that we want to clarify, if you don't mind. Okay, so the polling question. So for the folks that have to leave right away, that can't stay an extra 5 minutes, go ahead and answer the polling question. Now, I have a few folks asking about the 3-hour webinar that I've been teasing. I will tell you about that briefly. We'll talk about that. It will be on December 13 at 2 p.m. Eastern if you want to start saving the date. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we have, so by the way, getting these people to give a discount on their software, it is so hard. By the way, so hard. For me to convince this guy to give us 10% was like pulling teeth. So I'm gonna give you a link that gives you 10% off the software that expires at the end of November, if you want it. So I can send you the link to that. But I know 10% is not a lot. I mean, again, it's better than nothing. I've just never been able to get this guy to even give me a discount. I pay full price for this software and I promote the heck out of it. So that's a whole nother issue. So, all right. So we're going to finish running this polling question for the folks that have to leave. Let me go ahead and close it. And we're going to go about 5 more minutes. So just like 3 more minutes. Okay. So if you go to the Money Thumb website, you're going to see a whole bunch of options in their lineup. The most important one to point out is the $60 program, which is CSV to QBO. Great software. Again, if you're not dealing with PDF files and you have the CSV files, that's a must. That's like every single account in QuickBooks Desktop or QuickBooks Online wanting to increase their data flow into QuickBooks should own at least that one, because that one is the one that contains the capacity to go from Excel into QuickBooks Online, desktop or online, on the bank feeds. There's one called QIF to QBO, which is only valuable for the folks that are able to download the Quicken file from some banks. Only allow Quicken downloads because they're personal accounts, maybe personal credit cards being used as business. So the QIF to QBO can convert the Quicken files into QuickBooks files. That's a $50 program. And then you have PDF to QBO, which used to be the most popular one because it's the one that actually does what I told you that it does. And there's PDF to CSV that converts from a digital bank statement into an Excel file. But the Pro software, which is $299, has all the tools built into one. So that's why I recommend that one, especially for accounting professionals for this audience. That one has all the tools built to one. That's a $300 software. It's one-time fee. It installs on a PC or a Mac, and it does everything I talked about, with the exception of working on scan statements. If you want to work on scan statements, so I got to put an asterisk on that. Scan statements, it costs a little bit more, and there's an annual subscription just because there's maintenance and upgrades that they have to do to the software. So there's an additional annual subscription of $100 that you pay after the end of the year when you buy the software. It's $50 more to buy it up front, but an extra $100 per year, only if you're dealing with scan. And if you don't pay the annual fee, okay, if you don't pay the annual fee at the end of the year, the software still works. You just don't get the scan portion. Okay, so that's basically going to be your two choices: either spend $300 or $350, and the $350 one, in addition, it's $100 a year for that. So I want to make sure those two things are clear. So those are basically the two options you have. You have to choose between those two. As an accounting professional, those are the ones I recommend. And again, those are still a one-time purchase and installs into your computer. So I got this guy, the owner of the company, to apply a 10% discount. If you go to www.QBO, to.QBOconvertPro.com, and you choose either 2QBO Convert Pro or 2QBO Convert Plus, it should apply a 10% discount immediately. and this expires November 30th, so at the end of November. If you have a problem with it, just email me and I'll email him and whatever. We'll figure that out. But so I got him somehow to give us a discount to throw some sort of carrot at the folks that watch the webinar. So I try to make the case to why that everybody that I know that's an accounting professional should own that software. If you own the software already, if you don't own it, by the way, don't join my webinar. But if you own the software and you've kind of like a couple of the techniques I've showed you, I'm going to spend 3 hours going in depth on everything the software does and some of like the batching techniques and the cleanup techniques and the conversion techniques. I'm going to spend 3 hours on December 13 at 2 p.m. Eastern. And there's the link if you want to register for the course. There's a $150 discount for the folks that watch the webinar or watch the video. The people off the street that go to the website, they'll pay the full 350. Just use the coupon code, get $150 off. And yes, the knowledge, the time that I spent to learn this stuff, it's really, really great. And I'm giving away a lot of trade secrets for this. This is not the type of stuff that I would do in a free webinar, although I've given some today. But if you want to really go in depth on that, that type of things that I do, sort of like the check trick to, if you look up those back into there, take my webinar. So the last thing is, give me 1 second here, because people like when I copy and paste those links into the chat. So give me a second. Okay, so there is the Facebook group. Let me copy and paste that into the chat so you can get to the Facebook group. That Facebook group is meant just to deal with these type of things. So hopefully, as we get more and more people using the software, we can all help each other in like figuring out the best possible ways to import data, convert data, all of that stuff. That's really what the group is for. So if you join the group, just to chat about data import, data conversion, preparing data before coming into QuickBooks, bringing in thousands of transactions in minutes. I think it's going to be a hot group. It's going to be a small group. It's a very niche group. It's going to be a hot group, but I would love to see people joining it and start the conversation there. Okay, and if you want to take my course, as I mentioned before, you go into my Teachable page, and the link is right there. You just click on it from the handout, and or from the chat. I put the link there, and I'll see you on December 13 if you take that course. I always guarantee value on my courses. You take the course, you don't get 10 times the value that you spend. Just email me, you get full refund. I've teach to a very small group, and most of the times I'm very proud of the work that I do on my private premium courses. Anyway, that being said, I hope it didn't feel like an infomercial. In a way, it was, because I'm trying to convince you to do things differently, and I'm trying to convince you to use tools that that are not available for free, but the tools themselves multiply when you use them properly. I mean, this is the epitome of using apps in order to be more productive, apps in order to charge more, apps in order to spend more time to add value to your customers. Lastly, thank you, Avalara, for sponsoring QB Power Hour through the end of 2018. Check them out for tax compliance, sales tax type of things. They have an app for calculating sales tax and an app for compliance and sales tax. That's it for us. Next time we'll see you will be on Thursday the 13th at 12 p.m. for our next episode. Join our Facebook group to continue the conversation. And there is our email if you have any questions about sponsorship or topic requests, etc., etc. Thank you, folks. I will stop the webinar now. Thank you for attending, and I hope you got something out of it. Oh, thank you, Matthew and Linda, for manning the chat. I really appreciate that.